Hello everybody, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Diatone GTB 229 Pro. This version features the Diatone Mamba F411 flight controller, which is also the 13 amp 4-in-1 ESC. Runcam Split 3 Nano. VTX is the TBS Unify Pro 32 Nano. The motors are Diatone Mamba 1103 8500 kV, running the HQ 65mm push-on prop. Diatone products are generally plug and play, so you have to provide your receiver, and inside there is my FrSky RXSR. Motor post to motor post, I am getting about 105 millimeters. Skeleton frame is 3 millimeters tall and about 1.5 millimeters thick. It weighs just a touch over 62 grams. In this video, I used RDQ 525 2S batteries and GNB 450 2S batteries. With the 525, it weighs just about 91 grams. With the GNB 450, it weighs almost 90 grams. You also get a Runcam control board to change the configuration settings of your camera, a couple of wiring harnesses, beeper with a wiring harness, 2 colors of extra soft mounts, accoutrement of different M2 screws, an extra battery strap, a host of zip ties, and say it with me, stickers. We're going to start out front with the slow flight, and I'm doing this mainly because it seems to me that if you're looking at a micro and if you're looking at something with HD, you're putting HD much over performance. So when I set up the tune for this, I was looking to try to get as stable and jello-free a footage as possible. And this particular day, I also caught a day where the wind was really low. The Weather Channel app puts the wind at only 4 miles an hour, which is extraordinarily low from my location. It has been blowing a gale. Actually, it's been blowing a gale across the U.S. for a good portion of the last week or so. But it eased up, and so over lunchtime I went out and I ran this. I think this was actually yesterday. As you can see, I've got some people out there walking around. I'm trying to be the good neighbor and stay clear. And I do want to show you the FPV footage, and I will try to remember to do that, because the more I flew this, the more I started to think this has got a better FPV camera than I remember on other HD sort of quads that have the FPV camera and the HD camera. I am flying the 525 RDQ 2S battery, and I'm just flying that because I wanted some extra weight, and you'll get really good slow flight times with that. I think my notes say 4 minutes and 20 seconds in total. I don't know if we'll look at the entire 4 minutes and 20 seconds of this flight because I don't think you really need to see the entire flight for this. Now with my camera angle, you will get a glimpse of the props in the lower portion of the screen. Maybe you've noticed that already, but that's something to be aware of. That camera angle, you can get the props out of you, no problem. I was pretty happy with how my tune worked out, and I'll put the tune here on screen because I know most people only watch about 4.5 minutes of most YouTube videos, or at least the YouTube videos on my channel, so you probably want the PID tune. I get a lot of PID tune questions. I'm not sure why, but I do, and so provide that for you there. In the last couple videos, I've actually forgotten to put it in the video. I've had to put it in the video description. But I think this footage is pretty natural and looks pretty good. You know, again, that's me. I don't really look for HD footage. I don't think I have a great eye, so you need to do your own diagnosis of what you think of how jello-free this is. And I'm also curious of why we've seen this new iteration of Whoop cameras, but we've not seen any new iterations of ND filters, because I think with ND filters, especially in the little bit of jello you might see in this footage, the ND filter would probably knock that off. I need to reiterate, hit you on the head with a hammer again, that this footage is with very low wind. When it comes to micros and something that weighs this little, if you have a little bit of a breeze, it could cause a disturbance, and with HD footage you probably will see it. I also should note that on these TBS VTXs, those do not come unlocked, so you need to look at the TBS website, go to their support section, and look how to unlock these. I didn't unlock this one. I've done it so many times, I just kind of forgot, and I went out and flew it, and in this area, I didn't have any problems with video reception, so I didn't feel a need. But of course, this, like many of the quads that come to the channel, will end up in a giveaway, and I need to do one before the end of the year because I'm getting up to my gills and stuff. You will need to remember to do that when you receive. If you get one of these and you don't think the video reception is very good from me, then it's probably because I didn't unlock it. It will unlock. It does have smart audio. You can change the channels through your stick commands in the on-screen display. Makes it super convenient and nice in case you have a particular channel you want, or if you're flying with buddies, not stomping on each other. I think that's surely enough of the video footage. We've run through most of it for the slow, cruisy sort of flight out front. Let's go ahead and do our next one, which is faster and in the backyard. So this is my typical flying space. Unfortunately, the time of year we don't have a lot of colors, so we're going to get an awful lot of sun through all that scraggle. And this will be where I show you the FPV footage. Now in back, I'm trying to fly my typical style of going around the trees and kind of whizzing around and hitting some of the smaller gaps in the backyard. And then this gives you an idea with my tune how it flies when you're trying to fly fast. And the more air turbulence you create, especially with the TPU mount, the more shimmer and shake you're going to get in your camera. That's just a fact of TPU is flexible and micros are light. If you want rock stable footage, the best way to go is to a much larger platform and GoPro. And I've even seen plenty of experienced pilots struggle with GoPro footage and being jello free. You see that on Facebook every once in a while. Somebody will post a video and then somebody will post that meme of the jello jiggling. So it's not micro specific, but I think it's more exaggerated in micros because the platform is so small. This flight, because we're not looking at the OSD during this flight because of that juicy HD footage, is going to come in just about at 3 minutes, and this is also on the 2S 525 RDQ battery. You've probably heard it before. I'm sorry, long-time subscribers. RDQ batteries are made by GNB, so if you don't have RDQ near you, get a GNB, and it will be the same. Now on the back, you can see a lot more movement in the camera and the footage, and if you want this flight style with HD footage, you kind of have to decide if this fits what you're looking for or not. That's really not for me to determine because it's not really what this quad is going to be best at. We can get it as close as possible. It's something that has been what the manufacturers are shooting for, is getting something that's nice and stable for slower flight that gives us that HD footage, but also has pretty good or reasonable HD footage when you fly it more aggressively. And I'm going to go ahead and roll this entire flight. I do need to warn those people who haven't been to the channel before, I need to include some of the audio. I'm not going to do it right here, right now, because I've got audio that's stationary, and that's a good reminder. I should remind everyone that I use a stationary camera to sync audio that is essentially over the air, or the audio that I would hear as the pilot or in the area, not the audio that comes over the microphone. Here's a little section of the audio that comes over the microphone that's on board. If you have sensitive ears, you might want to plug them for here about 5 or 7 seconds. I'll turn the volume level way down, so even if you're listening somewhere on your phone and you don't have any earplugs, it shouldn't bother you too much. But here we go. And if I narrated that perfectly, that was right at the end of the flight. I got one more flight to show you here. So this is with a 2S 450 GNB battery, and I cranked up the camera angle here, and we try to go a little bit faster to give you another idea of how the footage looks, how the machine performs. The further up you crank the camera, you naturally just go faster. This will give you another visual of just being able to look at the footage so you know what you're going to get, so you can make the most informed decision possible for you. Pretty much burn through this battery pretty quick. I have to go into kind of battery saving mode and do some longer passes here after we get past a minute. The total flight time on this would be 2 minutes and 5 seconds according to my notes. You could definitely go faster and burn through that 450 battery. 450 isn't ideal for aggressive flying. I would say the 525 would be best, but I must have run out of 525s during this particular flight session, so I had to drop down to some charged up 450s, and that's why we're looking at a 452S flight with this quad at this time. So hopefully you have a pretty good idea of what the footages look like. I've given you flight times on everything. We need to also look at a section of the FPV footage. This is what you see in the goggles, and you see you have the red dot indicating the recording, then that flashes. Something that I didn't get a chance to record, and some of you that have been around will know it, but when you press the record button on the camera, if you're looking through the FPV view, you'll notice a shift or a shrinkage in the image in the goggles, and that's kind of activating that HD recording. So if you want a wider field of view, at least I believe it's a wider field of view, leave the recording off, but it seems to be, if that's the case, you wouldn't buy this quad with HD anyways. I think I said it previously, but just to reiterate, when you're looking at micros and you're wanting HD footage, you're giving up a lot of performance. Manufacturers are trying to decrease how much you're giving up, but when it comes to quads, power to weight ratio, you add more weight and you got to either increase your power somehow, but then if you compare it to the one without the whoop camera, you've got a greater power to weight ratio. It's kind of a cat and mouse. You have to decide what you want most. If you want HD, you can get HD, but you won't get the performance. If you want performance, you won't get HD. Okay, that was a lot of talking for me. I think I had about 9 minutes of talking through all that flight footage. I think I made it through all the way. One thing that I submitted online, and a couple of you may have seen it, is that this stack has movement in it. You can see it shifting. Even though it's got a metal screw all the way through, we've got shifting. So to firm up that footage a little bit more, possibly, I can't claim this to be 100% certain, a lock nut down here at the bottom would keep that stack a lot more rigid than to have everything soft mounted through there. Essentially, the only thing is securing the screw, and this stack is the TPU mount. And as you can see there's no nut or anything on top. So that's one thing that could be improved, and I submitted that online to Diatone. We'll see how that thing comes. Of course, you can add it later, but one thing I want to draw your attention to, if you can see that gap right down here by the USB port, I don't know if there's enough room in there to get a traditional lock nut down through there. I don't know if we'd have to shave something down, because you don't want it touching your USB port, because, you know, even if it doesn't touch when you install it, when you shift things, when you crash, because we all crash, then things shift, and I wouldn't want anything bumping up against the USB port. We don't need them nearly as often as we used to, but we do still need them. You might also notice the wires might not be so tidy. The first run cam camera that I had, it kind of worked, but it was odd. It was freezing up. I was trying all sorts of different cards. It's the first RunCam HD product I've had that didn't work. So I got one directly from RunCam. They sent it to me, and I appreciate them doing that so I could go ahead and finish flying this and do the review. I think their camera, in my opinion, for those that are still around, I thought the footage looked pretty good, but I'd really like to know what you guys that are more eagle-eyed about HD footage think of the difference between this camera and the Caddx cameras and the Foxeer cameras. I know we're going to kind of rule out DJI stuff right now, because that's a completely different HD category. That HD system costs, well, just one of the air units cost almost as much as this entire quad. So I don't really consider those in the same way, but so I had to take everything apart and get the camera back in, and as well as the bottom plate. So I probably didn't do it nearly as tidy as Diatone would do. I've talked about it before, but these skeleton frames, I'm calling them skeleton frames probably because I don't know the right word for them. They're very stiff, and even when you're trying to wiggle them at their weakest, I don't know if you can tell what I'm doing, it's still pretty stiff. I have to apply pretty good pressure. And then when you go this way, or a traditional way of trying to flex carbon, they're pretty stiff. Remember, this is 1103. I have to give it pretty good force to get that amount of bend out of it. I'm sure you can break these, but I didn't have any troubles with it. Of course, I wasn't necessarily flying it through all the typical shrubbery that I might have because I'm out of leaves, so I kind of have to stay away from the leafy part of the trees. But I did fly it kind of my normal routes, flow it my normal amount, and I was pretty happy with the fact that the crashes I did have didn't have a negative impact on the flyability of the machine. The frame and everything is fine. One thing I do like about Diatone's products is they always give us these extra screws that are kind of beveled here at the top. They're kind of shiny on the top, and then the rest of it's black. I don't know how well that's coming through camera, but many of you have seen that before. I like those screws. It's just a little extra bling. Also note, while we're looking at the bottom, we've got 3 screws per motor. That's not unusual for this frame design. And you can see how I mounted my antennas. And I also secured the battery lead with one of the mounts that I used for the antenna. I added a gummy pad right here just because that made it a little bit easier to get my batteries nice and tight. I didn't want the batteries wiggling in air because that would come in through the HD footage. So I used some of this super inexpensive UAV gummy pad stuff. I bought a box of it. I think it was like $5, and I've still got I think I've got almost 2 full pads that come out of the box. So that's been a pretty good value for me. It does not clean up nearly as good as Umagrip though, but it is substantially cheaper. And Umagrip has the light blue, which I do approve of, that's much thinner. But so this may have added some weight in that initial weight that I showed you in the quick roll. I do wish we had a consistency of all the nuts being the hex-headed. I prefer hex-headed, but you can see we've got Phillips around a couple of spots. So that's something that, you know, you have to grade, you have to choose on your own. We do have hex up here on the camera, so pretty typical stuff. I think I've covered just about everything I wanted to cover. Oh, one last thing I'll mention. I don't have the SD card in here right now, but it does go in this little slot right up here. If you can see where I'm putting my screwdriver, it goes right up in there. And because of the distance between the motor and the stack is so small, it was a little bit of a challenge for me to get that card in and out. Of course, you can use a pair of needle nose or some other sort of tool or device to do that if you have the same troubles that I do with my fingers, because you've got to get it up against the top part of that board and then in that little slot. Also note that typically RunCam HD FPV products come with a little bracket to lock them in. This did not come with that, so you shouldn't expect that in your kit either. So again, I want to leave you guys with a few questions. What do you think? What do you think of the footage? What do you think of this camera in general? Say, you know, rule out any sort of flight issues with the video. What did you think of this camera? Because I kind of like it, and I kind of like the coloration. It felt very natural. It felt very sharp. It didn't feel over sharpened. I kind of prefer it over the Caddx cameras, and I think they just keep getting better. And actually the FPV view I thought was pretty reasonable as well. We've seen some pretty foggy or, you know, hard to see through FPV views, and I thought this one was pretty reasonable. Matter of fact, I thought it looked better in the goggles, but again, I'm flying the SkyZone 030 goggles. They're OLED screen goggles. Flying with goggles with OLEDs is like getting a camera upgrade on all your quads. It's kind of funny. But I would like to know what you guys think of the footage. What do you think of the flight performance of something like this on 2S with an HD camera? And is this something you guys are looking for? If you have any other comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.